Oh yeah, no, I mentioned this was years ago. I use your Holosync tapes now, and they're fabulous. But when I started, I went to a 10-day retreat, and I came out. I was like, I couldn't believe how different my life was.
Oh yeah,
and you get
letters
great. Every day about how different people's lives are from Holosync. Absolutely.
Yeah, when you pay attention to what's going on in your head, you suddenly begin to make the connections between what's going on in your head and what is being created in reality. And that's a big, in fact, I think that's I was going to ask you, there's 60 or so success principles that you have in your book, the success principles. I was going to ask you what you thought was the most fundamental principle, but I'll just say that to me, the most fundamental thing is awareness. Once you have awareness, everything just falls into place.
No, it's true. My first chapter is on responsibility. Take 100% responsibility for your life. And you're accurate, because I used to teach this, that you can't take responsibility for that which you're not aware of. In other words, if I'm standing on your foot and I'm not aware of it, then at some level I'm not going to change my behavior. But as soon as you say, hey, you're standing on my foot, and I become aware of it, now I have a choice. I didn't have a choice before. Now I have a choice, either keep standing there or get off. And so people are doing all kinds of self-destructive behaviors. They're not even aware that their thoughts are creating their reality. They're not aware that certain ways they interact with people make people pull away from them. They're not aware that the way they interact with money makes them have less of it instead of more of it. And so every area where you can increase your awareness, you increase choice. That's why I love to read books. I've learned a lot about finances and leadership, things I wasn't aware of until I read them. And then when I reflected on them and applied them to my own life, they made a huge difference.
So would you say then that this taking total responsibility for what you create is the most fundamental principle?
Well, I put it in my book first because I think it is, but I would go back. I would have to concede to what you just said, that you have to be aware. I mean, if you're not aware you're responsible, then you can't take responsibility. The first thing is you have to become aware of these principles. There are universal laws. There are universal principles that have been codified in religion, have been codified in psychology, NLP, all the different practices that exist in the world. And if you study them and learn them, and then you act in accordance with them, just for example, if you save 10% of every dollar you make or are given, you cannot help but end up wealthy. Even if you only make $25,000 a year, you'll be a millionaire by the time you're 65. If you invested in any kind of, even conservative stock market portfolio or real estate or whatever. So that's something I never learned until I was in my 40s. No one taught it to me.
Yeah, the miracle of compounding.
Yeah, exactly. So there are laws like that, like the law of reciprocity. What you give out, you get back. There's a law I call probability. The more things you try, the more likely one of them will work. The more books you read, the more likely one of them will change your life. The more of these kind of calls you listen to, the more likely you'll hear something that will improve your relationship. So the idea of abundant research, abundant exposure to new ideas increases the probability that something will happen that's good. So, there are all these universal laws that if you know them and you are aware of them, then you can utilize them. If you're not aware of them, then you get the negative benefit, if you will, because they still work. They just work against you because you're focusing on the negative and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'd like your thoughts on something else that just occurred to me, too. One of the things that happens quite often when you first give people a glimpse of how they are creating their reality, particularly if they're creating something that is unpleasant for them and doing it, chronically, they feel ashamed of themselves. They feel like they're stupid for having done this, or even they go into denial about it because they don't want to admit that they've been creating it. Somehow they take the fact that they're creating something negative to be a commentary about who they are as a person, rather than just that they had the wrong strategy.
Well, when we were growing up, we all learned, unfortunately, I think, that when you got caught doing something wrong, you got punished. And it meant you were a bad person, go to your room, you don't get, you're grounded for a week, whatever. So we learned to avoid getting caught. And so basically when we unfortunately, we've applied that to self-awareness, catching ourselves doing self-destructive behavior. I used to do parenting workshops, and I used to have to always say in the beginning, look, I'm going to teach you lots of ways that parents unconsciously destroy the self-esteem of their children. And I'm going to teach you lots of ways to stop it. I'm going to teach you ways to consciously enhance the self-esteem of your child. You have a choice. You can either feel bad that you've been doing this stuff, or you can celebrate that you're now realizing you don't have to do it anymore. So I teach people, celebrate the new awareness, and let's start creating it the way you want it. Don't beat yourself up for how you used to do it. Because I believe, one of my great teachers said once, you're always doing the best you can with the awareness, skills, and resources you have, and you always did. And literally, if you could have done better, you would have. But you were missing some awareness. You were missing some skill. You were missing some resource. But now you have a new awareness. You have a new skill. You have a new resource. So now you can do better. And people almost always choose to do better when they can. And so we never blame people for the past. We simply say you were doing the best you could with the awareness, skills, and resources you had. Now you have new resources. Let's do better.
Yeah, I used to always tell people how they were unconsciously creating their reality. And then it occurred to me to add that they were creating it unconsciously and unintentionally, because no one would intentionally create poverty for themselves, or create feeling bad a lot, or create being lonely and alone, and things like that. No one would intentionally do that.
No, people are always attempting to do that which they think will make themselves feel better. A gang member on a street in southern L.A., South L.A., who is robbing a 7-Eleven store, is doing it because he thinks it's going to make him feel better. He's going to have money. He's going to have respect of his gang, etc. The problem is he doesn't have the same awarenesses of ethical training that you and I have. He doesn't have the same skills that he might have not gotten in school because he was dyslexic or dropped out or, got kicked out, or his parents were coked out and so he has some brain damage or whatever. In other words, he's doing the best he can to meet basic psychological and physical needs. And when we give that child better skills and resources, awarenesses, through education, through rehabilitation, they will choose to do better. But we can't expect them to do better ourselves or anyone else unless we have new skills, resources, and tools.
Well, and when you look around you in your community, whatever that is in your life, and you don't see very many different options, then perhaps robbing a store looks like one of the better options.
Yeah, and for some people it may be the only option that presents them with the solution to their problem. Unfortunately, our society is not very good, especially in our inner city and urban schools, in really empowering kids with the tools they need, whether it's the holosync awareness or whether it's the kind of things I teach on success principles, to give them the skills and resources to actually be able to go out in that world and be effective.
So tell me a little bit more about this new idea you mentioned earlier for another book.
Well, I basically, we've been talking about all along that basically I think the power of our mind is so much greater than the mere power of our physical efforts. One person I interviewed recently said every hour of mental work is worth 17 hours of physical labor in terms of producing manifested results in the world. Now, I don't have a way to validate that statement yet, but a lot of people who are spiritually aware and who've been in this world of, manifestation with less effort and so forth, and there are a number of people out there teaching that right now, law of manifestation, laws of, what do you want to call it, the...
abundance or...
Yeah, just a prosperity consciousness, all that stuff, that basically there seems to be a coherence in the field of theory that this is the way it is. So one of my great gifts has always been to take things that seem a little woo-woo and far out and write them in such a way that the average person living in Iowa, Nebraska, and Oklahoma can relate to it as well as the people living on the West Coast. And so that's really what I want to do now is to, I've been applying it in my own life with great success. So I want to tell my own story. I want to interview lots of other people, both anecdotally and people who are doing it as their entire life philosophy, guys you and I know like Joe Vitale and others, and to then write it in such a way that the average person can understand it and apply it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important change that needs to happen in the world, is for more people to understand this. There's way too many people that are creating miserable lives for themselves, and they don't really realize that they're doing it.